If you're looking to boost your communication skills, build better habits, and connect with people on a different level, then the Podgecast is for you. It's a place where connection and communication meet coaching. I'm your host, Podge, a seasoned expert in health, leadership, and psychology. Each week, we'll dive into topics related to health with a keen focus on the art of building meaningful relationships through insightful interviews and practical advice. I believe that everyone has a great story to tell, and by learning from each other, we can not only enhance our own lives, but also strengthen our communities and how we connect with others. So I invite you to join me on this journey of connection and growth. Let's get started. Welcome everybody to today's episode of the podcast. I am very, very excited for our next special guest, especially given that the week that it is in the lead up to the All-Ireland final. I'd like to welcome the one and only James O Donoghue to the conversation. James is, of course, a former senior Kerry football player for Kerry and renowned for his incredible achievements, including the 2014 GAA Footballer of the Year award. James had an amazing career. He still has one at club level as well. And he's had numerous accolades, such as, and correct me if I'm wrong here, James, is it how many Munster titles? Is it 9 Munster titles in All-Ireland?
One All-Ireland anyway, that was the main one, yeah. No, Munsters, you can't really count them. There wasn't really much.
We'd say
I don't think we take too much pride in the Munsters.
Absolutely, classic Kerry mentality.
But the Munster used to be it used to be almost the most important one to win. But then once Cork kind of started dying off, the Munster titles weren't as important, you know, and then the qualifiers and everything. So
there's Cork fans looking roaring at the screen right now at you. But I guess they were probably important, right? Because it's like that sense of rivalry, you know, close neighbours and everything. It's it added that extra spice to it.
Definitely, because when you're young, you need a rivalry to kind of start you off with your obsession or your passion. And I remember going up to the Fitzgerald Stadium when I was young, and all my memories of going up to games are Kerry and Cork, and how something would happen and you go home and you practice it in the garden, or you try and do it. So you might only be watching the game for 10 minutes and then you lose concentration trying to do it yourself. But like those days are so important. And then when they're gone and you're going up to games where there's, you know, a half empty stadium and no real passion, or it's harder to get the fire lit inside you. So I just think that those rivalries, especially Kerry and Cork, were so important for all our generation growing up, that you got to see that kind of that heat of the battle in Killarney, and you could then kind of have something to look up to and to aim for.
Yeah, sure. I would have grown up in Marion's Terrace right by Fitzgerald Stadium, so I do remember like there was some atmosphere around those days.
I'd say you could hear everything. You could hear every kick of the ball there.
Literally. So it actually changed. I think the TV used to be kind of more up to date, so the sound of the crowd would be relatively close to the action on the TV. Like if I was watching on TV and not attending, and then they brought in the digital, so it was like a good few seconds behind, so you could actually tell like something big was going to happen, you know, before it actually happened on the TV.
So you'd have the noise from the crowd, you'd have the TV on, and you'd have the radio on for the commentary as well.
And that was even further behind again. You turn down the sound on the TV and have the Kerry radio commentary going. Three different
eruptions of noise.
Yeah, absolutely. James, I know you obviously do the football pod with Tommy and Paddy as well weekly, and I know over this week or so you're going to be doing roadshows. You're going to be diving super deep into like the actual All-Ireland final. So I thought maybe we could take this conversation a slightly different route and just get to know you and maybe some aspects of your childhood and your family life and friendships that maybe people mightn't be as privy to.
There's a lot of skeletons in there, Podge. I don't know, do you want to know?
And we will only bring out 1 or 2 skeletons in the whole conversation, I promise. We'll keep it light.
Good. But that sounds good. I'm all football talked out anyway, so anything else, I'd love to go down a different route. So
yeah, I think it'll be good. We can discuss that. And then, of course, we will discuss maybe the lead up to an All-Ireland final, like how you prepared, kind of like the elite sports kind of mentality you have to show during that week in order to be successful and to be able to perform on that stage too.
Sounds good.
Let's start with just talking about your family life and the environment that you grew up in. So many might not know much about that aspect of your life, I'm thinking. So my first question really is, can you share with us maybe what it was like growing up in your family? Do you know, a family kind of entrenched in Kerry football?
Yeah, I suppose my family was more Legion, my club. Like, my family were huge Legion supporters, Legion fans. My auntie Mary, my dad's sisters, Mary and Anne, and my dad would have played for Legion and played for Kerry. So they were massive supporters of him. And I suppose I remember tagging along and going to his games, and I remember the smell of deep heat in the dressing rooms. And the smell of deep heat and cut grass. That is like, it just brings back so many memories for me. So as much as Kerry was kind of on the scene, it was more just Legion and football. And then on my mom's side, my mom would be very sporty as well. So she was big into basketball and athletics. And she put me into athletics early, and she put me into gymnastics early. And me and my brother Tommy, so we had a full kind of exposure to different sports, which looking back now was invaluable. Because I could obviously learn different traits and different skills from all different angles. So I had kind of the football obsession, and then I had, through my mom, kind of the aspect of the different sports. But I suppose I was always, as you see by the jersey I have on, I was always a massive soccer fan. So I thought I was going to be David Beckham. And it was actually the World Cup in '98 where this jersey's from. And then when Man United won the treble in '99, that kind of got me obsessed with soccer. So I had soccer, football, and then just kind of a spattering of the other sports. And I suppose it was just kind of a healthy, normal upbringing. But I suppose everywhere I turned, there'd be people asking you, how's the football going or how's the soccer going? And that kind of keeps you involved as well. So to answer your question in a short way, what it was like growing up, it was just completely sports mad. Like, my mom and my brother would be very academic. Dermot, God help him, he wasn't. I was more like Dermot. So I think I got a bit of leeway that way. And, every birthday party, you were at, most of them, was like just something sporty, something fun that we could get involved in. And we just thrived in it and loved it. And I suppose there's so much exposure to all the different sports that I couldn't help but keep it in my life.
I'm glad you mentioned the birthday parties, because I was gonna bring them up. Like, they're actually so much fun. I know that your mom would do kind of a lot of kind of fun games, sporting games with us, and then your dad would be like super serious. And it was always like a football training. There's actually one thing I remember that he did on, I don't know, it might have been your 9th or 10th birthday, but he'd just lay out a load of footballs and he'd say, like, pick them up like a running kind of dink. And I remember I'd run up and kind of like soccer style, like scoop it. And he'd keep going, no, that's wrong. Do you know what? Do it again. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm picking it up. But he wanted the actual stride not to break, and I think I was at it definitely for half an hour to an hour until you finally got one. So it's like you grew up in kind of, I know that was your birthday, but you probably, outside of that, was there other kind of semi-structured environments? Like, would you go out kicking with your dad or do some activities with your mom as well?
We would at times. Definitely, I remember nagging him a lot to come on, we'll go outside, we'll go a few kicks or whatever, and he'd set challenges like that. He was very good at setting challenges, and you'd be practicing and learning without realising it. And there'd be some sort of a win at the end, maybe, I don't know, a few bob or something, or some sort of perk. So he'd always make it fun, and that was important. But as I kind of said earlier, it was always, I'd watch something for 10 or 15 minutes, and that was it. And I couldn't watch anymore. I had to go outside and kick around. So like the garden was, I suppose, my training field, that's where I spent most of my time. I remember running home from school excited to play in the garden on my own. Like, looking back now, it was absolutely insane, but I'd have, in my imagination, I'd have a game in my head, and I'd have commentary. There'd be the works, the crowd would be over there. Like, I suppose for a young fella, I did have a vivid imagination of sports and where I wanted to go and what I wanted to be able to do. And if I saw something, I'd like to be able to do it then. So it was more kind of just my imagination, I suppose, when I was young. But I remember, like, they talk about parents and things. They're so important, like, for everything. Encouraging, criticizing at times, keeping you involved. I remember I left... I actually quit Celtic, so I was obsessed with soccer. I thought I was going to be David Beckham, but I quit because I was getting a semi-bit of a hard time off someone. Like, probably wasn't at all, but in my head. And I quit, but my mother kept on to me, go back, go back, go back, go back. You know, like, whereas I suppose she could have easily said, oh yeah, don't bother and do something else. And I suppose then when it comes to Diarmuid, he'd never give too much praise. So I think that with our team and our class, Podge, there was a lot of good players, and it was always a case of trying to get more and more and more from them and get them to be better and better and better. There was never a pat in the back. And sometimes I see parents at the moment, and even they'd come up to me sometimes, say the kid and the parent, and they'd say, this fella's going to be the next Colin Cooper, they'd say, in front of the kid. I'm like, Jesus, you're going to absolutely wreck him. Do you know?
Yeah.
Sometimes praise is nearly as damaging as criticism. You just have to support them as much as you can and make sure they stay involved and enjoy it, and then they take on their own path. So that was definitely my family way, where you get a little bit of praise maybe off the aunts and things, but closer to home it would be constant improvement. So you could do this, you could do that. So I think that definitely worked for us. I
think that's important. I can definitely share that sentiment with, when, as you were speaking, I was thinking of my parents as well, and like definitely not too far away. There's actually a few things you brought up there. One is, I don't know if you've read the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, but there's a section in it about for parents, and it's saying like helping your kids persevere. So grit is all about just like finding a passion and being able to persevere through it. So she has this chapter for parents where it's, if you and your kid kind of work out, like you commit to something, whether it's like playing a football season, playing like you're doing gymnastics for the year, the condition, it's almost like a little contract. The condition is like, no matter what, you have to stick with that for like they do like the whole school year. So it's just interesting, like when you dropped out of soccer, that Rita was kind of encouraging you to go back and stick at it. So I think that was maybe an important lesson, because you could have easily just said, nah, I'm not going back. And who knows, you might never play it again. You might have gone on to do something else, you know.
So easily have done that, yeah. That's actually a good one, that the parent kind of puts a bit of responsibility on the kid to see it out.
Yeah, and you're limited. You can't do 100 things. You have to like choose what's doable, because like there's only so much time in the day. But once you commit, like it's obviously if something egregious happens, you can maybe not go. But just in general, if you're saying, I don't want to go anymore, it's like, no, you've committed to this. Now you have to just see it through.
Because you're always going to have those thoughts. You're always going to say, geez, I don't know, could I be bothered with this now?
Yeah.
Like you have to be strong enough to say, no, those thoughts are just temporary. I do actually really want this. But I suppose that's very hard to identify as a kid. So that's actually a brilliant thing for parent to impose.
It's a good lesson. It's we've done topics before around like growth mindset and being able to kind of see challenges as obstacles that will be overcome eventually, you know, and I think that is just part of that's helping, the parent is helping you to kind of develop that growth mindset.
No, 100%.
You also mentioned about something being on the line, like if you were doing something with your dad, and I think it's a pretty contentious topic now, right, between the having kids play for fun versus like playing for competition. Like there is definitely kind of something going on at the moment where we don't want kids to be competing, and I do understand that to a certain extent, but I kind of like how you said, if there's just something on the line, maybe a little bit of jeopardy, and it could be made up jeopardy, you know, you're thinking in your mind it's like a World Cup final or an All-Ireland final. I do think it just kind of heightens the sense of, kind of prepares you for higher stakes kind of games. Do you think that, or what do you think?
Definitely. I am a firm believer at a certain age of making it, not having a winner and a loser maybe as the important part. So it's all about the involvement, the skills, the touches, how many interactions you have, all that stuff definitely is far more important. But if there's nothing at all on the line, you're less likely to give max effort, I think. So you have to have, otherwise you're relying completely on your own self-drive, which can come up short at times. Sometimes you need something else just as a little bit of a motivation. But no, I completely agree. Even with the youngsters, I would like to see, especially in GAA, which would be obviously my scene, smaller games with more touches, more involvements, and less kind of focus on the result. Because I see all over the county, from a bit up to 15, up to under 15s, the coaches want to win more than more than the players.
Yeah.
And they're actually putting their pressure onto the players, and they're playing in a big 15-a-side match, and it can get a bit tricky. But I do at the same time think that you have to almost formulate that winning mentality as well, of you get used to winning and you want to win. And I think that even those small things about having something on the line, they factor into that a bit as well.
Yeah,
so I think losing. Now you were the worst loser I've ever come across. Like the worst. The most annoying loser ever. But it's actually a good trait, because you'd almost give everything to win then. And I think that's a good trait to just take on, because you won't just accept defeat. Whereas some people, if there's nothing on the line, they just go, on to the next thing. And you don't actually get as much out of it as you can.
Yeah, those school games were intense, James. The lunchtime matches.
It's still going on.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I came out with more victories than you in our time in primary school.
I'd say you did.
I have it on a year on you, yeah. And I have a copybook at home every time, yeah. It's like 50 wins this year, delighted. I was going to ask you something as well. You kind of said about having smaller games for more touches for kids, and you talked about your childhood, that you'd come home and you'd be straight out to the garden and practicing something you saw on TV. Like, do you think that's lacking now, given just like a lot of stuff is online now? Like, there's a lot of technology. People probably spend more time indoors. There's also maybe like the safety aspect. You used to be out roaming around the place, no problem when you were young. Now it's a bit more cautious. I'm feeling like, I'm curious if you add up all the contact time you had as a kid versus maybe the lack of contact time kids might be getting these days, like that could make a huge difference in terms of like their skill development.
Could not agree more. Like when I was young, my mother refused to leave us have a PlayStation or an Xbox or anything like that. I think the first one I got, I was 17, I'd say. I'd already banked so many hours of practice on my own at that stage. Mm-hmm. It's horrible to sound like an old fogey when you're saying, you should get off the PlayStation and stop watching telly. But I mean, we'd no Sky. Probably had 3 or 4 channels until the same age, and no PlayStation. So I suppose I was delighted to be outside kicking around. But the amount of contact points I had with the ball at that stage, the relationship I developed with the ball because I had so much time with it, you can't get those hours back, I think. But I'd be even talking to some primary school teachers, and they say the same about kids' motor skills. Mm-hmm. That back in the day, because everyone was outside running around, you could run and jump and pick something off the ground at pace and roll over. But now they're doing simple drills with kids of 7 or 8. They're completely not used to doing any of these.
Yeah.
And it's a complete malfunction of the body at that age. If you're not using it, you're going to lose it. So I suppose we are probably losing a lot of talent because people are inside spending hours on the computers and things. It's just the way that the world has gone. But in terms of player development, I think it does make a huge difference.
Yeah, not only physically as well. Like the angle I kind of take with this podcast, and something I'm passionate about as well, is I think people in general are finding it harder, like, to connect with other people and to communicate with other people too. And I could see that bleeding into sport as well. If you can't actually have a conversation with someone, you can't tell them either what you want them to do, or you won't be able to build like a better bond to maybe function as a team. Because I'm thinking about us now, we'd be going hard at it down at lunch, like playing soccer or football and kind of kicking lumps out of each other. But in ways, we were also developing kind of like our communication. We understood how each other worked, or what we liked, what we didn't like as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. And even the thing you said about being around an estate, like I grew up in an estate in Scran Court, and there'd be a few of us around that would always be available in the evening to go out and mess around or be at any game. I had no interest in any games other than football and soccer really at the time, but there was the opportunity to go out and roam around. Whereas now, it was a case of come back in when it's dark. Whereas now I think it is a lot more cautious approach, which is fair enough, but it does make a difference. I remember myself and Reece Farrell, who was in the other estate, we needed to get players to play 11s. Do you remember the crossing and heading game? So we used to go around knocking on doors to see was there anyone our age living in that house. I mean, thinking back now, it's mad. You'd never do it. You wouldn't even hear the doorbell on houses. No, there's no one knocking on the door, but we just had to get more people involved. So we're constantly just outside messing around and kicking around. So it was a huge part of my life.
When it comes to you in particular, I've done a bit of kind of looking into like bilateral, like left-footed, maybe right-handed play. You hand pass with your right, you kick with your left. In ways, you're kind of like, you actually are in terms of studies, you're actually kind of a maverick in terms of Gaelic football in particular. And there's only maybe a few players who are kind of bilateral. Like, did you intentionally practice both sides when you were younger?
Yeah, I've heard that since, that if you're left-handed and right-footed, or the other way around, that it is an advantage. I did spend a lot of time on it, and again, it was because of my dad. I was left-legged, which in our sport is so obvious. It's actually a weakness. You know, you'd be taking a shot, and you could hear people on the other team and in the crowd saying,
He's all left
leg. He's all left leg. And it's such an insult for a left-footed player. I find, and my father was left-legged as well, and he used to hate it. But I suppose he never developed his right to the level maybe that he wanted to. He did have a very good opposite leg, but never to the level that he wanted. So he'd be on to me all the time. If we were talking about a match we just had, he'd say, "You scored 3 points, but you got none with your right leg." You know, he just leave. And it wouldn't be a criticism, but he'd say it in a kind of way, and I'd be, Jesus, yeah, you know, I didn't. I need to work on that. And then it just became, it's like when you're in the gym and you do left side, right side, you know, shoulder press or bicep curl or something. It just became like that for me. It was like, why would I do this with my left and not my right? And it just developed from there. And then the more you use it, the more you will use it. And eventually it probably became just as good as my dominant side. And I was lucky. So lucky. Because I see people now, even in football, and it's so obvious. My father was right. When they're left-sided and next thing they can't come back on the right. It's just such a tell for the back. So I am delighted. It was the best thing he did for me anyway, was make me practice my opposite side.
Yeah, like from a defensive point of view, then it just makes it so much harder because you can't predict what side you're going to go. It almost opens up like more angles of the pitch for you too, which is a huge advantage.
It does, and it works with your brain then, because you've suddenly got so more options, you've more ideas, you've more confidence. You want the ball more because you want to explore these different options. It's just so important. And even in terms of training, for bang for your buck in different sports, and I'd say, like, if you could practice your non-dominant side in Gaelic football to a high standard, like, that would affect your game so much more than some of the other training we're doing, which is, a lot of it's not time wasting, but it's kind of just going through the motions. Whereas if you could actually really have two strong sides in field sports, it would change people's games completely.
Yeah, I think the obvious example with the game coming up is like Shane Walsh is fantastic off both. You know, I'd say he's probably one of the most impressive from a kicking standpoint, and I would argue maybe more subtle, and definitely with his hand passing. Like, I really like Paul Murphy from Kerry as well. I just think he was so tidy, and it's very subtle, but it just makes him such a complete kind of footballer as well. So it is really important. And like you said, it's really noticeable when someone is very much one-legged, but especially if they are left, I guess, because there's less left-legged players out there.
Oh, it's a complete giveaway. If you're playing at a lower level, fair enough, you could almost dominate the game with a good left leg. But as soon as you go up the levels and they know about you any bit, you're cut. They're the same with the right leg now. You know, if you're too one-sided, they're going to cut you off. Then again, Luka Modric for Croatia never kicked the ball with his left leg, ever. Yeah, but he actually developed other patterns to kind of compensate for it, with outside of the boots and toe pokes and different things.
Yeah, he's notorious. He's famous for that outside of the right kick.
Outside the right, yeah.
I do just want to let's spend a bit of time, James, talking about your friendships as well. So I think we spent a little bit of time talking about school, a lot of time talking about family. Like, how did your friends influence your journey in sport?
I would say equally as important as all the other things, if not more. I suppose we were lucky growing up that we had a very sporty and competitive class. Mm-hmm. And you know what plays into it a lot when you're young, it probably did for me as well, was, you know, that bit of jealousy in terms of someone else being very good and you wanting to be as good as them or better than them. Or even, I remember our friend Jonathan Lyon got called up to the Kerry under-21s on his very youngest year, so he would have been just out of minor. I was raging, you know, I was like, I was so jealous, and it actually focused me a bit then, you know, because I wanted it. So even that little reminder was so important. But I suppose when you are kind of what you hang around with. I suppose that's very much been proven. If you're hanging around with people who are maybe going out and living their lives a bit differently, maybe not in the health world or the fitness world or not in the sporty world, they're doing completely other things, and you start enjoying that. Whereas I suppose when I was growing up, I was very much hanging around with the successful sporting people, and it dragged me along. I definitely wasn't the leader of that. I was more kind of just going along with it because the people I was around with were doing it. And the longer you stay in something, the better you're going to get, the more you're going to grow, and it 100% paid off. But even from that class, from when we were in the Man, we had so many people come out of that who were brilliant sporting people. And we're very lucky, because if you're caught with a group maybe who aren't interested in that, you fall away from it so easily.
It's interesting that you said about the jealousy. So at work, I actually use this example a lot. I usually say, like, there's people at work that are super high achievers, and I look at them and the first thing I feel is like jealousy. I'm like, they're so good. But then the second thing I feel is, right, like, what can I learn from them to better myself? So rather than sit in that kind of jealous mode, I try and extract like positives from them and see which I can adapt to my life. And just as you're even talking, like, I got kind of flashbacks to our schooling, and that's probably where it stemmed from. There was severe jealousy, whether it's like you with your left leg, or Lino could kick the ball 100 yards since he was 6, or Brian Kelly being a good goalie. It's kind of, you do take, you might have jealousy, but you can also kind of drive each other on in that sense as well.
Oh, definitely. You have to use it in the right way. But I think it used me to, all right, for me, it was just a case of more focus. I was like, it gave me extra reason to cut out the side stuff, that you get so sidetracked by when you're maybe 15 to 21 or 2. Say, even when we were, say, with Kerry teams and things, it was so much easier to go into that high pressure environment and completely out of your comfort zone with someone that you're that close with. Like, there would have been 4 or 5 from our school class from the Man in with Kerry and Kerry training. It was so much easier to go into that environment, and a bit of a cheat code, really, because other people are going in and they don't know anyone. They're worried enough about their athletic ability and their footballing ability. Now they're worried about settling in, whereas I suppose we just landed in and we didn't care because there were so many of us.
Yeah, you already had connections built up.
We already had connections. And then after training, some people are left to stew in their own thoughts on a drive, maybe back to Carsavine or Dingle, maybe an hour and a half away. Whereas we were going back into town and hashing it out ourselves. And if anything needed to be said, it would be said. It was such a strong kind of support network, I suppose, that you don't think about until you're having this kind of a conversation on a podcast. You don't realize how lucky you were to have those little conversations that just kind of either put you at ease or make you feel a bit better, or take your mind off something, or give you a bit of an encouragement, or give you that bit of criticism that you probably might need as well.
A lot of teams now, like, and you'll have more of a know in terms of Gaelic football, so it'd be good to hear your perspective on this. But I know a lot of professional teams, like soccer teams in the Premier League and stuff, they develop their game, like their actual physical game on the pitch as well, but they also spend a lot of time around what they're called mental framework. So it's actually how you prepare for the game, how you think during the game, how you think after the game. And you just gave that example of someone driving by themselves versus you all communicating or talking together, right? You're actually, without even realizing it, processing the mental side of the game, and you're able to come over setbacks quicker, or maybe think through aspects that you want to improve. Whereas that person by themselves, they can think to themselves, but you also need kind of that framework to help you process. Is that becoming more apparent in football? Are people focusing more on the mental side of the game, or is there still a gap there?
I think there's still a gap. Definitely at inter-county level, it's there. The support is there, but I think people are insecure about it. They don't like being associated with it. And even going back to my time when I was young, I remember a couple of people came into the Kerry dressing room to talk to us, and they were nearly ridiculed out of it, and laughed out of the place behind their back. It just didn't. It made people react uncomfortably to it. Now that has obviously evolved, because I think there's now more one-on-one interactions, just so powerful. Like, I wish I was into it more, but you can have if you're a substitute, you can have this one-on-one with a sports psychologist, and they can tell you how to focus and how to keep cool and how to keep calm. Like, that is so beneficial. I suppose the only bit of mental training I did, I obviously read a few books and things, but there was a book called Hockey Tough. I don't know if you ever hear of it.
Yeah, there's who wrote it? Because Dan Abrams wrote Football Tough or Soccer Tough. I'm just wondering if
I think
it's
it could have been it. Well, I
yeah.
think it could have been him. But it was about the ice hockey crowd. So he had examples of the ice hockey lads. I didn't know that, but it was so transferable over to football about the offensive and defensive plays and things, and just what you actually feed yourself, what you say to yourself about how good you are comes out. If you're critical of yourself or you're kind of not accepting of what you are, you're going to perform that way. Whereas if you can tell yourself over and over, I am outstanding at this, this, and this, if this happens, I am going to react this way. It's so powerful. I remember I bought into that for a long time, but it was just when I was kind of coming back from my injuries and I didn't really, if I got very fit, I remember I felt very strong mentally that whatever happened, I could block it out. And that was definitely something that I struggled with when I was younger.
Yeah, I know. Like I would have marked you since like what the age of 7, 8, I would say, and I always remember in 2014 that like you were just, I don't know, it was like a mental focus. It was also like a physical. Like physically, you were in top form, but I just remember you being a different kind of animal in that sense. Like the words I would kind of use were, would be focus and aggression. I think would be the two. It was almost like you were in a state of flow around that period of time. It felt like it looked effortless to you.
Yeah, no, I definitely was in a state of flow looking back. I never thought I was going to go out and play anything other than very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably did loads of times go out and play absolutely rubbish, but in my head, I myself convinced that nothing could go wrong, or what's the worst that can happen. I don't know. I was just in a very strong place that time. A story came into my head. I'm not forgetting it, but
no worries. But it is super important. I think for footballers or any sports people to work on that mental framework and that mental side of the game as well, because it obviously contributes to what you do on the pitch as well.
It's absolutely the most important thing. Like even as a corner forward, the chances are you're going to make a couple of mistakes and a couple of kind of high profile mistakes. You might have a goal chance and in front of 60,000 people you miss a goal and it's the worst thing in the world in your head. Whereas you need to be able to block that out and not think about it. And even before all that, the structured psychology of it with players and things kind of took off. Players would come out with little nuggets in the dressing room that would help you, but completely they've thought of it themselves. I remember Donegal Walsh had one where he said, lads, no matter what happens, no matter how many mistakes you make, the next thing you think about is the next ball. So every time you get rid of one ball, all you're worried about is that next ball. It's like you're starting the game again the next time. Don't worry about what's happened. Don't get too high over doing something good. Don't get too low about doing something bad. Just think about the next ball. And like, he didn't read that anywhere, I think. He just kind of developed that himself, that's what he needed. And it was those nuggets, I suppose, that we had rather than anything scientific based, and we played off that little bit from Donegal for years. We said it every meeting we brought it up because it was so key. So I can only imagine if we had a little bit more of it.
Yeah, well, what that does really is just gets you focused on the moment you're in versus kind of thinking about what just happened or staying in that area too much. So yeah, that is an iconic phrase over the last like 10 or 15 years.
No, it really is. But if you get stuck in the past, keep rehashing it, makes you feel worse and worse. And next time you get that same ball, you're going to only think about what went wrong last time, and you're not going to think about the endless possibilities of what could go right. You're manifesting something going wrong rather than the other way around.
Yeah. It can be a tough, when you're in it, it can be hard to get out of it too.
You can.
James, let's just change kind of our route here. We'll just talk a little bit. I'd love to tap into kind of like your elite mindset, especially given the week that it is, that you have two teams in Armagh and Galway are preparing for very possibly the biggest game that they might play in their careers, right? And it can be really, I would say, challenging to prepare for such a big occasion. I'd love for you to talk us through maybe from times where you've won a semi-final to a final or even post the final. How do you prepare physically? How might you prepare even mentally, or what's going through their mind this week?
Well, I think for someone who's in it for the first time, it can be a very daunting process. Even I remember the night before our All-Ireland final against Donegal, I couldn't sleep a wink. I remember I was lying down and my heart was beating out of my chest, and it was such a new feeling. I was like, what is this? So like it's a new array of feelings for a lot of people. But even in the build up to something like an All-Ireland final, there's so many distractions again. Like you've got your people asking you for tickets. You've got your traveling to the game, staying overnight in Dublin. You've got the after event, people coming to that. as you mentioned before, you got your suits, you're getting your suits measured. Then you've got the press onto you, maybe looking for a bit of an article. Then they might look to talk to maybe someone in your family. So that you've got all these distractions going on. And it's fantastic to be involved in that. It's so exciting. But if you engage in any of that, you're 100% taking your eye off the ball when it comes to the game. And I suppose any mistakes that there were to be made, I probably made them, but I was able to hand over a lot of those responsibilities to my father and just say, look, will you look after him? Because he knew probably how scatty I was, and he also knew the lay of the land, with what was supposed to happen. But I've seen people just go very badly wrong in the lead up to All Ireland's with the distractions. I think that's the main thing. In terms of the nerves, the best thing that can happen to you is the ball is thrown in, because otherwise you are inside your own head. And I suppose the second best thing to the ball being thrown up is being with the group, being with the team. I used to find that when I was at home on my own, I'd be thinking about it too much. Mm-hmm. Whereas for other games, maybe the less important games, it would barely come into my mind and go out again, maybe come in and go out. But once it was an All-Ireland final, really, nothing else was in there. And I used to enjoy being in with the team where they could distract me out of it. So if I was to give advice to any players in it for the first time, I would definitely say engage in as little as possible. Try and hand over responsibilities to people you trust, and stick close to your teammates and distract each other. Because actually with your teammates, the last thing they want to talk about is the game. Whereas when you're around your family and your friends, they're only delighted to talk about it. So the one crowd who want to be distracted are also your teammates. So once you get into the circle with them, you're kind of free from it a bit.
Yeah, I was wondering, do you keep a close knit of family and friends? Like, this was so back in you had 2014, but even since then, like, technology is even more invasive, I would say. But did you like put your phone away? Did you ensure like no one can contact me outside of the group? Like, was that an intentional thing by you as a team, or is that just kind of everyone taking individual ownership?
I think individual ownership, but it has changed a bit recently because there's only a 2-week build-up. I think it was a month for us, maybe. So you probably had a week of everyone telling you how great you are and congratulations on winning the semi-final. Then you had straight into the tickets and then the suit. So it was more drawn out. I think it's easier to kind of turn your back on it now, but like the social media aspect is huge as well. Any sort of social media or newspapers, players should not be engaging. They should not be reading. It softens you. Any good player going into an Ireland final is a great player in the media. Any fella who's not playing great is in the worst form of his life going to the final. Like, they're going to spin it a little bit more severe than it really is, and sometimes you can believe it. And it's just dangerous. There's no need to engage in. Just stay away from all that stuff. Social media. Someone can easily say something to rattle you for a couple of hours, and then you look back that day and you're like, I lost a couple of hours worrying about that. Why? Why did I bother? So yeah. I hope that the Armagh and Galway lads are staying away from all that.
Did you get caught in that at some stage in your career?
Again, it wasn't as bad 10 years ago. Do you know, it really wasn't. I mean, Twitter definitely wasn't the toxic environment that it is now. Instagram, same, wasn't as big. Like, there's clips of every play in a GAA game now going around online, and there's comments underneath it criticising players or praising players or calling a fella the GOAT or saying he should be thrown off the team. Do you know, like, there's all these different comments. They do nobody any favours. These people are literally watching clips for 30 seconds online and forging an opinion on them.
There's probably some fella with about 40 accounts and sending out the same tweets or the same comments as well.
Someone on a rival team with a bot account.
It's a good idea. No, I'm just kidding. So the lead up to you saying getting to the game, like, I can almost sense the relief. Ball is thrown in. I can just do what I do and off you go. I don't want to say that you lose sight that it's a special occasion, but does it just become like every other match then? Or I presume maybe in parts of the game, you know that each point is probably more valuable than perhaps a less significant game, or definitely, I'm presuming towards the end, you very much know what's on the line, and that might change your mindset a little bit.
I suppose when I was playing, I was more concerned with what we were doing, I suppose, as a forward unit, because sometimes when the ball keeps going over the bar at the other end, you can take a hit, you know, emotionally. It's like, no, let's go. Whereas I think we were very good at just saying, we'd almost be talking to each other as the ball was down the other field. Next time it comes up, now we'll do this, almost trying to distract ourselves if there was a a proper patch for the opposition. But it's mad the way once the ball is running, you don't think about the fact it's an All-Ireland final, or it's a big day, or that there's people in the crowd, or there's everyone relying on you. It's just a game. You know, you're playing with the same fellas on the same field that you did the previous game, just against a couple of lads wearing different jerseys. It becomes very, very simple very quickly. But the mind makes it into this complex thing that makes your heart beat out of your chest like it's going to explode. It's mad the way the mind can work. But once the ball is in, it's like, oh, this is where I should be. This is, all is okay in the world now. I'm on the field. I definitely had that feeling.
I do remember Eamon Fitzmaurice saying he's quite a bit as well, and I think he said it on his analysis in RT too. Like, it's a simple game, but sometimes we have a tendency to make it seem incredibly more complex than it is.
Mm. But you know what I used to enjoy as well for grounding, and I don't know if you get this in other sports, but the parade in the GAA. So you do a lap of the field behind the band, but you've got that time to take everything in. It's like right, take it all in now, and that's it. Then we're done. So you can walk around the pitch nice and slowly, gather your final thoughts, maybe what you're going to do for the first possession, or maybe for the first 5 minutes, or tell yourself again how great you are. Just for that little few minutes, look at the crowd, take it all in, and then boom, it's done. I used to actually look forward to the parade as well, just for an extra bit of calmness come over me.
Yeah, you'd actually use it as you'd use that time to help prepare for the game.
Yeah, 100%. And you can kind of just, even walking around, you know, your chest is up and your shoulders are back. You have to tell yourself, I'm supposed to be here. We're here. This is it now. Let's go. Those few moments can be very powerful for a fella, or they can be crippling if you get those last few words to yourself, you get them wrong.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea. It almost kind of, I'm trying to think of examples. It's like if you are a band and you're like so coming out onto the stage, you're coming out confidently, checking out the crowd. But I actually love the idea that it goes around the whole pitch. So you're not just in one spot, because I can imagine that feeling like quite small. You know, you're in one small spot and you're looking around at everyone. You're actually able to walk around and kind of, get to see every corner of the pitch. And you're using that as like a mental preparation as well, just to be, even if you have like your chest out and portray a confident body language, like that can actually internally help you feel confident too.
100%. I used to actually take note on how I'm walking here. I used to want to walk as loose and as confident as I could. Even just to fool the crowd into thinking that I'm, confident and relaxed here. Yeah. It is it's a fake it until you make it kind of a situation, and I definitely thought about all those things, but I'd love to do it all again, and formalize all these little thoughts I had and write them down and make sure I did them all, because some of it is so powerful,
A book, perhaps?
Well, I can't remember all of it now, but at the time as you're going through it, you pick up little things.
Yeah.
And then you lose them again.
It's actually, I'm sure for those who followed your career closely, when you were describing the walk around the chest out, I'm sure they could picture exactly what you're doing. You had a bit of a swagger, a bit of a smirk, like a smile as well. Portraying, you said fake it till you make it, but you definitely fooled me and fooled a lot of people, I'm sure. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else around. I had a few more questions around maybe the game. When we were talking about the final, you actually mentioned like how we function as a team. Did you feel a sense of pressure coming into the 2014 final specifically, because you were kind of like the go-to player at that time, like Kerry's kind of scorer, talisman, kind of, you were like quickly emerging as that. And then from my recollection, it's been a while since I rewatched that final as well, but you did a collective job for the team. It wasn't necessarily like you shot the lights out in the final and brought home the trophy, but it was you all worked as a unit. You did their part, everyone else did their part, and they won it. So my question is, did you ever feel a sense of pressure that I have to be the one to do it, or were you purely focused on just it's a team game and we'll all just work together?
I suppose I wouldn't say I felt the pressure, but I definitely believed that I needed to perform. I think we all did. It was like, we all need to be at top of our game here to win, because we were under no illusions ever that of our level. We didn't think we were ever going to go out and win any game handy. It was a case of we need to perform all the time. And I definitely did think myself I needed to score heavily most times to help us win. I suppose that was the way we were playing, where the ball was going into the full forward line regularly, high, low, up, down, in or out. It was going in there, and I suppose that was our job to get it. It was very different to now, but it was up to us to get it and score. And in that final, I remember we had a couple of weeks of training coming up to that Donegal game, and it was just so different. We were so tactical that Fitzmaurice really came into his own over those couple of weeks, but I hated it. I remember I reckon I got burnt out in those few weeks. It had been such a long road, and we were in the final, but it was so tactical that training wasn't as enjoyable, and the ball wasn't coming in as much. We were doing different things, and I remember being a bit thrown by that, but it was 100% the right thing for team, of course. And then I did play a little bit of a role where I came out a bit, but as much as it was discussed and it was like, James, you're not going to be getting all the ball aside, I didn't really believe it. Going out onto the field, I probably still thought it was going to be as it was, but it really wasn't. And then I didn't score in the final. I remember I was disappointed with that. I had a couple of chances, but I kicked wide. So I was disappointed with that. So it would be interesting if I did have. I wish I had a shot later in the game, because I would have liked to see how my mentality was, because it wouldn't have been very often where I went an hour without scoring. There would have been a free or something anyway from my side that I could throw over and get into the game, but it just didn't happen that day. But yeah, it's mad. Like, I felt such responsibility probably to score and be the scorer and make sure that the scoreboard was tipping over. And then that day it was so different, but such the right thing, because we ended up winning. We played such a good tactical game. And I was proud. I actually remember feeling a sense of pride that the people kind of said it to me afterwards, and the team. It was like, you did us a different role that day. We appreciate it, because that's nice to hear as well. So I was. It was definitely a different kind of occasion, different turnout for me, but I enjoyed the different role.
Yeah, I think the fact that you were willing to do that for the team as well, obviously that's what it is, to be part of a team, and that's what you had to do to win, and you did it.
But I would have done anything that time to get over the line. Like, sometimes when you're thinking about winning, what is winning in your head? Like, winning to me that time was standing on the steps of the Hogan, watching or waiting for our captain to lift the cup. That was the one image I had in my head that I wanted to be in, because I saw so many pictures of teams gone by in the past and the players lining the steps of the Hogan, and the look of elation on their face. I was like, I want that. And then the term, they're going up the steps of the Hogan. As soon as I used to say that to myself, I get butterflies. And that's what I remember. I remember wanting to do that. And even the last play, I think it was Brian Sheehan had a free at the end of the game. And that's what I was thinking. I was like, if we can secure this ball, we'll be going up the steps of the Hogan to collect the cup and reach the promised land. That was what winning was for me. It wasn't necessarily being All-Ireland champions. It was just being able to walk the steps of the Hogan as champions.
So a lot of the Armagh and Galway players right now are probably having similar thoughts. It might be something different. It might be just like the initial final whistle, like falling to the ground or running to your friends or climbing those steps.
I've heard a few of them talking, actually, some of the Armagh lads, and they definitely have the one where they have the Sam Maguire at the front of the bus. I've actually heard them talk about it, and I can tell it's like, you've talked about that in training. That's your powerful thought. If we win this, we have a chance to put the Sam Maguire to the front of the bus as we drive home to Armagh. Like, that is powerful. And we talked about that a bit as well at that time, but that was just the image I had in my head that got me to the place where I needed to be.
Yeah, there's actually a lot to be said for visualization. We use that a lot in our coaching at Noom as well, that even if you're trying to build up to doing an action, there is science that the actual act of visualizing, you could just sit down and do it from wherever you are, actually helps you kind of to achieve that goal. So it might sound silly, like, oh, imagine the Sam Maguire at the top of the bus, but there's actually something to it that it will actually help you get towards that as well.
I have no doubt about it. I think it's so powerful.
Yeah.
And as well, it's a collective one. With that one, it's like, we will have this at the top of the bus. It's not an I, so it's a more general one. There's no pressure on it. This is our reward. We're going to go home with this at the front of the bus. I just think it's like a pressure-free incentive.
Yeah. And just keeping kind of on the Kerry theme as well. I know with Kieran Donoghue, with Armagh as well, from my experience with him, like he strikes me as a guy who's really good in terms of visualization. He's probably also going to be really good in terms of motivation for that team too.
Yeah. Well, even he definitely would, but I think Donaghy buys into all the new technologies in terms of all the way the game is played. But I think his most important role this week will be he's been there and done that. I think he was in 7 finals. I mean, 7 finals. Mm-hmm. Was it 8? I think it might be 8 and 1-4 actually. So he's been in 8 finals. He knows every single thing that can go right and go wrong. Imagine how much experience he has. And
incredible.
If he can actually give that to the Armagh lads and make them feel comfortable with it, then that would be, I think, his major role done. But even from his being a teammate, I remember he had such an aura about him that if he tapped you on the shoulder and said something to you positive, you'd grow. You would grow. And like that, if he said something maybe that you need to work on, you would actively work on it. You know, you have those people who just have this aura about them. He was definitely one of them. So I can only imagine how many hands he's put on fellas' shoulders this week or two to make sure they perform. That's why I'm giving Armagh such a chance. I think that mentally, McGeaney and Donoghue are two people that buy into that mental approach, big style. I think they can have a big say.
Yeah, I suppose one more thought on Donoghue. I know he's kind of in an assistant capacity, but obviously he's having a huge contribution. Yeah, I could just see him being such a wonderful main manager as well in the near future.
He could, but I suppose the only thing is with the main manager these days is you have to save your voice. You know, like we've had managers in the past where they talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and eventually the power goes out of it. You have to really be careful what you say as a manager and not over talk, because you want whatever you say to actually land. Mm-hmm. Whereas a coach, I think, he can say a lot more and have a lot more input, and fellas kind of then choose whether to take it or not, to an extent. But it's just with the management, I think you have to be so clever what you say. And even look at the teams I was on with Eamon Fitzmaurice and Cian O'Neill, who's on the Galway team now, would talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and Eamon would bide his time and come in when he needed to. I think that Donoghue and McGeaney, I'd imagine they have a similar relationship, whereas Donoghue, inspires them and gives them a lot, and McGeaney will come in and just rubber stamp it, nice and calm and cool. I think you need that duo.
Yeah, I was just going to say that duo is obviously paying dividends, right? It's very successful.
Oh, it is. Well, no one would have said they get to an All-Ireland final, so even the fact they're there.
Let's, while we're just on this subject, let's try to briefly, like, what you think predictions are. I know you have this on the football pod. You're going to be talking about it extensively, so we'll just touch on it a small bit, as it is the lead up to the All-Ireland final. What do you reckon?
Well, as I told you earlier, Pat, whoever I say is going to win is guaranteed to lose, because I haven't got a prediction right all year. I think that, do you know that old adage where they say you have to lose one to win one?
Yep.
And I think it does come back to having the experience of being around the final, coming up short and knowing what you need to do to get over the line. For that reason, Galway lost to Kerry 2 years ago. I think that they've been around it before, they've lost it, they've felt the hurt, they've carried it for 2 years, and I think that hurt and that been there before will give them a chance to play their best. I think they'll play uninhibited. So I think that they're favourites. I think that they will win. That said, Armagh can tap into... Actually, when I'm talking about teams' chances of winning, I'm always thinking about their emotions or their mentality. I never actually think of their ability. But with Armagh, they haven't been around in so long. It was their first semi-final in 19 years. First final now again in 19 years. So the amount of waiting they've had, imagine how much they've been going. When we're back, when we are, now they are. Now they're there, ready to go. They've taken huge crowds to every game. They absolutely belittled Kerry support in the semi-final. They had the orange wall in the hill. Everything they did was just roared on and cheered on. I mean, it must be an unbelievable feeling for those players. The only thing that I would that might come against Armagh is they built themselves up so much to overcome Kerry, and they got such a great feeling of winning that. To come down off that and get back up again is very difficult. And you might know the science of that, Podgy, I don't, but like the feel-good factor of winning such a big game and then having to go back in on a Tuesday night and saying, right, let's park that, we have this, and everyone is on board, but there's still some fellas and they're thinking about the previous weekend. It's human nature, it does happen. So I wonder, can they absolutely forget about that Kerry game and get back up to where they were for an All-Ireland final? The fact it's a final, I think they probably will, but that's just the question mark I have over them. And I think the Galway have more of a settled feeling, where Armagh possibly don't.
Yeah, it's finally poised, I think. And then it's interesting you mentioned, I know you're saying you're going on the emotion aspect, but I think maybe it's because the actual skills part of it it's so similar. Like, the both teams have some unbelievably talented players as well, and it really depends on the emotion. You've probably been part of finals where, like, emotionally, like you hit the nail on the head, versus emotionally you might have fell a bit flat as well, and you can probably see the comparison between that, and maybe that's why it's coming front to your mind too.
Well, I think that we had more time between games. So I think it's such a quick turnaround. Like, there's a season within a season within a season at the moment in GAA, with the groups and the provincials and the knockouts and the All-Ireland finals. So there's so many times you have to come up and down and up and down and up and down.
Yeah.
So I think that Galway left a little bit in the tank in their semi-final as well. They didn't play that well, and I think that's a good way to go into a final. It's like maybe even in athletics, when you run the qualifier and you're not going to set a PB. You don't want to. You just want to qualify. I think Galway have done that. I think they've just qualified, and now they're ready to actually play their best football.
Yeah, I think teams are picking that up the last few years with the change in schedule. They have to it's kind of like Man City do it so well in soccer as well. They wait and peak for like April or May.
The only danger with that is that you don't peak at all. Or you wait so long, you're out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, we've probably seen that from our own county, right? We were kind of always waiting for the flame to ignite, and just didn't quite happen.
Yeah, you think you can turn it on, but you can't.
Yeah.
Like, with both teams, we know members of the backroom teams very well. Like, we obviously know Kieran Donoghue, and we know Cian O'Neill from our Kerry days, so he's in with the Galway team. So I'm very much a neutral in it, but I still think it's going to be so interesting to see what actually pans out. It's going to be, without a Dublin or a Kerry, you've also got that feeling in the back of fellas' minds, we're never going to get this much of a chance again, which is wrong, but it does kind of creep into your head. Dublin are going to be back again next year. We need to win this one. And does that make you more confident, or does it kind of make you more anxious?
Yeah, and I was at the quarter-final games and was walking out of Croke Park after the Galway-Dublin game, and there was a fan behind me, and they were saying, this is great, now all we need is for Kerry to be knocked out next. So I think there's just a novelty to this year's championship, given that it's maybe two teams we mightn't have expected from the very beginning.
Yeah, I think two new teams, the championship needed it as well. Football needed two new teams, two fresh sets of supporters, and a new winner. I think that's important. Like, if Armagh, I can't imagine the good it will do in Armagh if they win again. Just to get their underage. They've had very limited underage success recently. To get that into gear, kick that into gear, bring Sam McGuire up to Armagh, and likewise in Galway, like, they have had some underage success, but if they were to win it, it will just give the whole county more focus. Yeah, we're spoiled in Kerry. Honestly, I don't think people realise it. We have, at the moment, Kiss My Arse Provincial Championship, which leads you into a handy group in the series, which means you're almost guaranteed an All-Ireland semi-final.
Yeah.
Okay. Which gives all the players exposure, which gives the sport exposure, which gets people interested, and it keeps this chain reaction going. People want to play football, people enjoy football, people go and watch it. You take that away for a couple of years, and it can become very quiet. Like, Kerry are on, they want to be careful, because if that was to be the case for a couple of years, other sports start creeping in and getting a little bit more traction. And that's what happens in other counties. That's why other counties go up and down, whereas Kerry seem to be an ever-present, because Munster at the moment, Cork have taken a hit, and Munster's not strong enough to knock them. Yeah,
it kind of just breeds like a culture of football, in this case, into Kerry. Like you said, it's always constant. There's always a big occasion every year. And I mean, myself included, maybe we do take that for granted a bit.
We do, 100% we do. But like, that exposure for kids to see
Yeah.
These heroes of theirs on the telly, they want to then go out and play in that garden. You know, they want to kick the ball and learn and play like them. Whereas you take it away for a couple of years, I'm telling you, things change very quickly.
Yeah, yeah. But it's an exciting final. So if I'm hearing you right, you're saying it sounds very close by the way you're talking, Galway to shave it because of the experience that they've previously had.
Well, they played each other 3 times recently. They've drawn twice, and Armagh won by point once. They've gone to penalties. They've had such close games. Like you couldn't possibly say that either side will win comfortably. If you went through 1 to 15, I think Galway might be a little bit stronger, but I think Armagh's team ethos matches that. So, yes, I think it definitely won't be a one-sided game, or it won't be a runaway victory. I think either a 1-point victory for Galway or all the way to penalties.
Yeah. Okay, 1-point victory to Galway. So I do just want to be the first to congratulate Armagh on lifting the All-Ireland. You heard it here first, James. I don't know who thinks Galway, so Armagh will win. No, I agree with you. I think it'll be incredibly tight, but I think it'll be a good game as well. I think there's a lot of footballers on that pitch, and they'll just have to do what they do and play some football.
Yeah, I just hope that they go out, throw the shackles off. They don't worry about losing or about missing. They just play their best football if they can. If they can get into that psychological flow state, as you say, just go at it. Yeah. It's going to be one of the best days of their lives.
Yeah, it's exciting. Is there anything, James, before we wrap up, do you want to promote anything regarding the football pod or any events coming up?
Not really. I suppose we have, with the football pod, we do a couple of live shows every year. So we have one, I don't know when you're putting this out, Podgy, but we have one on the Thursday night before the All-Ireland final. So it's going to be an event in Croke Park, in the Hogan Suite in Croke Park. So we're looking forward to that. We did the same last year. It was a bit easier last year because it was Kerry Dublin final, and obviously 2 of the hosts are Kerry and Dublin. So this year will be a bit different. So we have a couple of great guests lined up. Stevie McDonald from Armagh and Paul Clancy from Galway, both All-Ireland winners in their day. So it's going to be a great night. We're looking forward to that. That's a good kind of showpiece event for us as well, because obviously we do a lot of Zooms, I suppose, Zoom calls, and we don't get to interact as much as we'd like. So to get a live show out with a couple of guests and a big crowd would be a great night.
And I know previously you said tickets were sold out for this, I think, when I last checked, but there might be kind of like a resale or a fresh batch coming in the next week.
Yeah, so they were released when there was no teams in the final. So I think a lot of Dublin supporters probably snapped them up, thinking that Dublin would be in. So I think they're selling their tickets at the moment. So it's still sold out, but if you do want a ticket, if you just send a direct message to the Football Pod Twitter, then Tommy will put you in touch with someone who's trying to sell them. But they are officially sold out.
Excellent. All right, cool. I will be sure to send a message to Tommy as well. I'd like to be there and check it out.
I'll be able to look after you, Patchy, don't worry.
Cheers, James. All right. Just as we close out here, James, just want to thank you so much again. I do appreciate you taking the time. I know it's a hectic week for you leading up to the All-Ireland final, but if I do say so myself, you have been a fantastic guest, and to be a bit soppy, an even better friend. So I do appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Thanks, Patchy. Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
All right. Take care. See you, folks.
See you later.